I'm going to put it on the file this time. So thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon or evening. How do I want to present this? Sorry, I'm having some kid noise in my background that's distracting me. This is the Diversity, Equity, Access, and Inclusion training that's presented as part of a spring technical assistance series presented by Market Umbrella. Our guest Monica Slyvain today is going to be our presenter, but in the chat, I'll add a link to the rest of the classes in this series. Of course, Market Umbrella is the nonprofit that has been running the Crescent City Farmers Markets for the last 26 years. We also run a host of nutritional incentive programs, SNAP education, producer support, small business development and incubation, just kind of all things food systems. And so this is part of a beginning farmer and rancher development training program offered to vendors within our network, offered to prospective vendors, I like to think, graduates of the beginning farmer and rancher development training program cohorts, and to general audience for anybody who enrolled today. So I'll pass it off to Cordelia to talk a little bit more about how this also fits into our strategic plan.
Thanks, Angelina. So I know a lot of you, but hi, everyone. My name's Cordelia Heaney. I'm the Executive Director of Market Umbrella, and it's great to see so many of you here today. As Angelina mentioned, this training is part of our Beginning Farmer and Rancher series, and it's also part of our strategic planning process. We are in the midst of building out our 3-year plan to look at what are key priorities for our work, how can we best serve our community, and that includes both our shoppers and also vendors like you all. And as part of that, we really wanted to look at our diversity, equity, access, and inclusion policies and procedures, and really look at how do we better weave those ideas into the strategic planning process, so all the work that we do and all the goals that we set have that lens, so that it's not something on the side, it's something that we're working on all the time as part of our full organization's work. And so we're really excited to be able to offer this training that's stemming out of an assessment that we've been doing with Monica. That's included her getting to interview several vendors of the markets, as well as board and staff and some shoppers. And so really excited to hear more from her today, and I'll turn it over to you, Monica.
Awesome. Thank you, Cordelia and Angelina. I am delighted to be with you all here today. I'm going to just get started by sharing my screen, and then I'll walk through a little bit of the logistics before we get started. Except, where is my presentation? I'm sorry. I'm having a little bit of a technical issue. Hold 1 second.
Did you see make it so they can't see us?
While she's doing that, I would say, Monica, I don't know what your preference is, but folks can add questions that they have to the chat. And we would ask that folks mute themselves unless they're talking, just to make sure that everybody can hear.
Thank you for your patience. I don't know what happened to my presentation, but now we're back in action. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. So like Cordelia said, today is the first in a series of trainings that I'm doing for Market Umbrella, for the vendors, for the board, for the staff. And I titled the training today, Belonging for All at the Farmers Market. And this, you'll see in a few minutes, came out of the assessment that I did around diversity, equity, access, and inclusion. But before we get there, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Dr. Monica Slyvain. I'm the founder and CEO of Monica Slyvain Consulting. We are a management consulting firm and a trusted advisor for diversity, equity, access, and inclusion, both assessments, developing strategies and plans, and then implementation. And so a little bit about me, my background is such that I've been working in the DEAI space for about 20 years. I actually started in the science, technology, engineering, and math disciplines while I was working on my PhD in chemistry at LSU. I was very interested in diversifying the STEM disciplines at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level. So I started a research scholars program at LSU while I was doing that. And as a part of that, we began to learn how to bring cohorts together and have difficult conversations around race and social issues and gender issues. And so I've been doing this work for a very long time. Just prior to me starting my consulting firm during the pandemic, I was the chief diversity officer at Iberia Bank. And we sold the bank in 2020, and then I decided to sort of strike out on my own. So that's a little bit about me. In terms of my plan for our time together, like Cordelia said, if you could just start out by muting your microphone, I promise you it won't stay that way. The way that I like to do my trainings is very interactive. I will ask you questions. I will ask you to participate in different things. And so I will be asking you very soon to take yourself off of mute and participate. The second is the chat functionality is enabled. I will check it from time to time. If Cordelia and Angela and Lena are going to be here, they could check it for me as well. And they could stop me and say, hey, we have a really great question here. I talked about audience participation. I do have a couple of videos. And then also, I don't know, Angelina, if anyone needs live transcript, but I typically enable that when I'm doing my trainings. So this training is really designed for you as vendors to give you space. To do three things, to consider a lot of different things, to imagine sort of what the future can look like for the farmers market as you go forward, and prepare yourselves as an individual, as a person who sells product at the farmers market for creating this belonging space and this welcoming experience for all. So in the work that I've been doing with Market Umbrella, there are several recommendations that I made to the organization. The one that I will be spending time on today is this first priority called welcoming experience. And the recommendation was for them to create an experience that is welcoming, relevant, and accessible for vendors, shoppers, and farmers of all backgrounds, abilities, and interests. So this will be the focus of the training today. So the question is, who are we creating a welcoming experience for? I know I mentioned vendors, shoppers, and farmers. And you can take yourself off of mute if you have anything you'd like to say, but is there anyone else, anyone missing here? And when you think about the farmers market, when you think about your role as a vendor, who do you all want to create a welcoming experience for? Is it just the shoppers? Is it just for you as vendors? Is it just for farmers or farmers who are also vendors? Is there anyone who's missing? Any thoughts out there?
I would say
Yes, Dan.
people that know nothing of the market. It's reaching out to that part of the industry that knows nothing about market life.
Thank you very much. Any other responses? Awesome. Thank you so much for that response. And I would totally agree with you. People who know nothing about the farmers market, maybe even people who used to come to the farmers market and for different reasons they've decided not to come. So maybe there's a way to re-engage those people by doing this. And then that priority also recommends that it would be available to people of all backgrounds, abilities, and interests. I've put a list here of what I think all backgrounds, abilities, and interests means. I'd like for you all to take a look at this list. Does this also mean the same thing to you? all backgrounds, abilities, and interests. For example, I put people have different thinking styles, family statuses, upbringings, income, national origin. I'm sorry, somebody has something they wanted to say? Can you put yourself on mute, whoever is not, who's not having, thank you so much. Marital status, political beliefs, learning style, social roles. These are all of the different things that I think about when I say all backgrounds, all abilities, all interests. Maybe there's somebody that's on the autism spectrum, right? Maybe there's someone who doesn't have a visible sort of mental, different type of ability or health kind of issue, right? Maybe it could be almost anything, right? So these are all the different kinds of people who have different backgrounds and abilities and interests that we're talking about when we're talking about creating a welcoming, relevant, and accessible experience for all. And some of these things you see, and guess what? Most of these things you don't see. So what you see on the left is called the Diversity Iceberg. And if you know anything about an iceberg, you know, way up in, Alaska, near Alaska and really far north, most of the ice is below the waterline. There's very little, like maybe 10% of the ice that is actually above the waterline. And what we have a tendency to do as human beings is we have a tendency to observe what we can see above the waterline, right? We can make a guess, even above the waterline, sometimes we're guessing. We can make a guess about someone's age, right? We can make a guess about their religion, maybe how they're dressed or how they're not dressed. We could make a guess about how they self-identify in terms of their gender or their physical ability. These are things that are conscious. We try to access our senses to figure them out. But most of the diversity, right? Most of the abilities, most of the interests, most of the backgrounds of people is below the waterline, meaning it is invisible to us as human beings. So it could be skills, values, sexual orientation, personality traits, their culture, their language. Sometimes we might assume just because we're in the US that their first language is English. It may very well be Spanish or Deutsch or German. So those are the things that I want you to keep in mind as we move forward, right? When we're thinking about backgrounds and abilities and interests or diversity, mostly it's what we can't see. So most of your customers that you interact with, your shoppers that you interact with, unless you've known them for a very long time, there's much of them that you really don't know that much about. So then why are we having this training? I always think it's important to talk about why we are having a training. So I put 6 things here that I think might be of interest to you as a vendor. Like, why might this be important to you as a vendor that works at the farmers markets with Market Umbrella? It might help you to gain better interpersonal skills by the things that you learned today. It might help you for the shoppers who already really love you, right? They might become even greater advocates for you out in the community, at their jobs, around their families, and the other festivals that they attend. You might be able to retain some shoppers that were kind of on the fence, right? Not really sure if I'm going to come back and see Timothy next week or come back and see Michael next week. It might create increased social connectivity for the shoppers that are there. And just that social connectivity makes people actually want to come back to the farmers market over and over again because they really enjoy just the experience of being there. And that in and of itself might help you to convert, right? And gain new customers in terms of increasing your customer base. So I could think of 6 reasons why, just off the top of my head, that this might be important for you all. You can take yourself off of mute. I'd like to hear from some of you. What other reasons might this be important to you as a vendor? If there are any others. You can just take yourself off of mute if you'd like to speak. If these are all the ones and I hit a home run, well, that's good. I like getting 100% on those exams when I was in school. So I'm happy for that. So why else might we be having this training? And I'm going to start out by asking you a question. See this ladybug in the top left corner of your screen? How old is this ladybug? I'll give you 15, 20 seconds to look at that ladybug and then decide. Is the ladybug 4 years old, 5 years old, 6, 7, 8 years old, or can't be determined? You can either write your answer in the chat or you can say it out loud. Either way, it works for me.
Got some guesses in the chat.
Yep, I see a few 7s.
Can't be determined.
Okay, we have a can't be determined. How about the rest of you? Can't be determined. We have a 6, a 4 in the chat. What else? I'm not sure how to tell. Thank you. 8 years old. Any other responses? Can't be determined. 7. Awesome. Thank you all so much for participating. The correct answer is that it cannot be determined. And the reason why I wanted to show you or ask you this question about the ladybug, number one, is because it took me years to realize that that was true, that you couldn't determine it. I don't know where I got that from, but I used to think that the number of spots on the back meant that was the age of the ladybug until I actually looked it up and did some research, right? And there are over 5,000 different species of ladybugs, and those spots have nothing to do with their age, right? And so I use this example because we meet people all the time, right? As a vendor, you have you have a flow of people that are coming through the market, farmers market, whether you're at the one uptown or Lafitte Greenway or wherever you are. You have all kinds of people, right, that are coming across your path. And this example for me drove home that there are widely held but false beliefs about people that are different from us, especially knowing that their backgrounds, their interests, their abilities, all of that diversity is below the waterline. It's invisible. And it's not really until you get to know people in a really deep way that you are able to sort of say how old they are, what religion they belong to, etc. And because many of us hold these false beliefs, they come from many different places. And they begin as what we call associations. And these associations, for all human beings, they begin when we're babies, quite frankly, right? When we are a baby, if we're fortunate enough to have a high chair, then you started to associate that with food, right? Or if you had a crib, you would associate that with a nap, and you would really fight your mom because you didn't want to go take a nap, right? You were going to feel like you were missing something, you know? And a lot of people will associate their parents with comfort or other things. Associations can have negative connotations. They can have very positive connotations. And essentially what happens is, as we age, we begin to absorb different kinds of associations and assumptions and stereotypes. We absorb them through our families. We absorb them through commercials and things that we watch on TV. We absorb them through having conversations with other people, through society. And they end up being sort of evolving from associations and assumptions into stereotypes. And so there are 5 that I list here, right? There could be cultural stereotypes. They could be social stereotypes. They could be racial stereotypes, gender stereotypes, religious stereotypes. There could be all kinds of stereotypes. So here's a few that I've listed here on the bottom left. Sometimes for some people, not my husband, of course, right? Women cook meals and men are the breadwinners. Sometimes people have these associations or stereotypes that men are the real leaders and women are the supporters. Or that if a person is LGBTQ+, they just weird. Like, you know, they must have come from another planet or something. Or if they're Black, maybe you have a stereotype that all Black men are thieves, or Black women for that matter. Or maybe you might have a stereotype that if they're Asian, they must be really, really smart. Or if they're Latino, you might have a stereotype that they're an illegal immigrant right off the bat. And they might have been born here and be just as much a citizen and an American as you are. So those false beliefs come into play for all of us as human beings, right? And they do develop from being associations and assumptions into actual stereotypes. And those stereotypes we carry with us into our older age and throughout our lives, right? And there's so many that we carry with us. Again, they could be positive, they could have negative connotation. And because the mind moves so quickly, there's a term for this called implicit bias, or you've heard probably the term unconscious bias, that was created by the two psychologists, Greenwald and Banaji at Harvard in 1995, right? And basically what they were saying is that our social behavior is largely influenced by these unconscious associations or judgments that we make in our minds, right? And these biases really do sort of manifest themselves as attitudes that we have or stereotypes that we have that really do affect our ability to understand and decide and act. And they're difficult for us to control. So I feel like the best way for you to really understand what an implicit or an unconscious bias is for me to take you through an experience. So on this next slide, I'd like for all of you all to take yourself off of mute. And as you can see, there is a table on the screen, column 1 labeled number 1, column 2 labeled number 2, and column 3 labeled number 3. Your task is to ignore the letters and shout out the colors and read out loud as fast as you can, go down each column, 1, then 2, then 3. Are there any questions? You can take yourself off of mute now. When I say, I will say 1, 2, 3, go. When I get to go, then you can start. 1, 2, 3, go.
Green,
Red,
red, purple, green,
blue,
yellow,
Say three.
red,
Green, yellow, orange,
yellow,
blue, yellow, blue, orange, green, orange, purple,
Yellow,
green.
red. That's what the TK.
Well, I see people who were not on mute and were participating and they went back on mute. What happened? Well, don't answer it yet. Don't answer it yet because we have 2 more rounds. Next slide. Same rules. Ignore the letters and shout the colors. Go as fast as you can. Go down column 1, then column 2, then column 3. Go.
Green,
green,
red,
red, purple, green, blue,
Yellow, red, purple.
Green, yellow, red.
yellow, red, purple.
Orange, green.
Wow, you all
Yellow,
were
red,
quite
purple.
fast that time. That's exciting. I am always been a proponent of getting the best grades. So you got an A+ on that one. Third time, same instructions. Ignore the letters and shout out the colors. Go down the columns, 1, 2, 3, as fast as you can.
Green,
Go.
Green, red, purple, green,
Yellow, red,
red,
purple,
blue,
green,
red,
green,
red,
yellow,
yellow, red, purple.
red,
purple,
green,
yellow,
yellow, red, purple.
red, blue. Yeah,
Okay,
purple.
not so bad,
Not too good.
but I really want to know, how was that?
A little bit harder, a little slower.
yeah,
Harder and a little slower. Go ahead.
had to focus on the word versus the actual color,
And why is that?
because the mind tells you one thing, but the actual word tells you another thing.
Excellent. Anybody else?
Just hurt my brain. It was just hard. It was hard to
Yes,
focus.
it hurts your brain. It is hard. And why was that hard? Whoever's speaking, I can see your cap, but I can't hear you.
Yeah, just because of the two things going on. What you see versus on the two different levels. It's just hard to focus.
Absolutely. Yes. Anybody else, please?
Made it hard having everybody else in the background as well.
Maybe that's society in the background, right? Sort of telling you what you should be thinking about people and how you should behaving. Maybe, I don't know.
So seeing the color of the word and then hearing it all at once.
Yes. So basically what this exercise is designed to do is to have you to experience what we call cognitive dissonance, right? That just means that someone said it very well, right? That was hard because your mind wanted to do something else. Your mind had an association that it wanted to just hold on to. And that was not what I asked you to do. I said, no, I want you to call out the color, right? But your mind wanted to call out the word. And so that's essentially what happens as for all of us as human beings, as we walk through life and have these sort of unconscious biases, right? Or assumptions and associations that we have about people, groups of people, cultures, and all of that. So just to give you a little bit better understanding of how the brain works, there's this book on the left by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow. He's a Nobel laureate. And in this book, he makes it easy to understand how the brain works. He talks about the two systems of thinking. System one is what he called cognitive ease, right? That's where your brain is working so fast, right? And is making updates so quickly. It's automatic. It's almost even impulsive for us as human beings. We assess a situation and we deliver an update. Just like in the exercise I had you to go through. You wanted to say green when the color was red because your brain said, no, that's green. But I told you to say the color. So it was assessing the situation, delivering an update. It's very fast. You don't really do a lot of thinking, right? Conscious thinking. System two is what he called cognitive strain. And someone said it, that exercise was hard, right? It made my brain hurt. Why? Because you had to use effort, right? You had to control your mental processing to be able to actually follow to do what you were asked to do. It's slower, right? And when you're using system two, that part of your brain, you're looking for missing information. You're assessing everything in a global way so that you can make decisions that are logical, right? And so this is fascinating because that says to me that we can do something about the unconscious biases that we have. So in system one thinking, so if I ask you all to complete the phrase bread and, what would you say? Bread and what?
Butter.
Butter, bread and what
Cheese.
else? What?
Cheese.
Cheese, bread and cheese.
Water.
Yep.
Water.
Bread and water.
And roses. Totally.
What?
Bread and roses.
Bread and roses. So my point there is you could think of something immediately, right? Because your system one thinking is fast, it's impulsive, you already have an association that you can bring up readily, right? If I asked you what's 2 + 2 through rote memorization, you could say 4. In system one thinking, again, it's slower. So if I asked you to explain to someone how to parallel park,
Mm-hmm.
not so easy, right?
Right.
It will be deliberate, right? You would have to really think about, what am I telling? You don't want them to hit another car, right? Or if I told you to count the number of the letter A on this slide, could you give me an update in 2 seconds?
No.
No. So that's slower, that's system 2 thinking, right? And so the last thing on this slide that I actually like, just because I am a science and math person, is what this Mueller-Lyer illusion on the far left at the bottom. When I was taking geometry, the teacher put this picture up on the wall and said, are those 2 parallel lines the same length? And I kept saying, no. Everybody in class says no. But the reality is that they are. And so our mind tries to make sense of the world, right? But it tries to make sense of the world through other experiences, right? Other associations. And so we have to be mindful of that and conscious of that as we're going forward in the workplace and at the farmers markets. So this is an example of bias, not just any old kind of bias. This was racial bias. This is actually from an article in the Washington Post in 2016, when Google was really cited for racial bias in their image searches. So as you can see, this same person put in the search bar 3 white teenagers, and you can see the pictures that came up, and then put in 3 black teenagers, and you can see the pictures that came up. Now, Google has since fixed all of this, but really what it spoke to is that the unconscious bias that the human beings carried with them, who are actually writing the code, right, to be able to give updates for these Google searches. And so that's why it's really important for us as human beings to not only be aware of our associations and assumptions and stereotypes and bias, but to really understand how our brain functions so that we can slow things down, right? And say, oh, well, no, I'm not going to really think about that way. I'm going to think about it in this way. Okay, so I have something else for you all that I want you to participate in. Spend about 45 seconds. Look at these 6, or is it 6? Yeah, 6 pictures. And then after I'll let you know when I want you to start responding. You can either put it in the chat or say it out loud. Who was homeless at one time?
Ella Fitzgerald.
Just keep looking. I want to give everybody an opportunity. Yeah, thank you. I think your name is Maddie. I'm just looking at the chat. Thank you so much for putting that in there. You're right. This exercise would be difficult for someone who's colorblind. Yeah. I'll have to think about that and make some adjustments.
No clue.
Somebody said no clue.
Without Googling, I mean, I could Google and.
No,
pick
don't
something
Google.
out,
I just want to know. Thank you, Ann. Okay, so whoever's ready, I think somebody said Ella Fitzgerald. Anybody else have
Dr.
any?
Phil.
Dr. Phil. What are the other thoughts out there? Thank you, Maddie. Okay, some people said no clue.
74.
Another person said all of them,
The
question mark,
football
and somebody
player
says
was
don't know. That's Michael Orr, the football
Michael on
player.
the blind side. Yes, so he definitely was.
All, and
Homeless.
somebody else said all of them.
Yep,
And
the
let's see,
football player.
the football player, the blindside
Yeah.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Know that for sure.
Okay. Who's the person in the middle at the top?
Halle
Mm.
Berry.
Halle Berry.
Halle
Okay.
Berry.
Who's the person in the middle at the bottom?
That's football player. That's basketball player. That's
I have
he
no
has
idea.
that cleaning. What is his name? Oh, tell us because it would drive me crazy.
He's
I've
not a
seen him.
football player.
Basketball, and he has a
He-
cleaning. He owns a big business.
He's not an athlete, Anne.
Ah,
He
Okay, I
never
thought
was.
Uh-oh.
He never was. It's okay. That's called, and I think I know based on association, but it's not, that's not. Did you all ever see or hear about that movie, The Pursuit of Happiness?
no,
Haven't seen
No? Okay,
No.
so then Cordelia or Timothy, you're going like this. Do you all know who this is?
The Will Smith movie, based on a real person about a homeless guy who like had to do unpaid internships when he was homeless on the street with his son.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
okay.
think I
Became a
remember
very-
something that.
Successful financial advisor, I think.
He did, Timothy. He became an extremely successful financial advisor. Yes. And then who's the person in the bottom right?
Sandra Bullock.
Hillary Swank.
Hillary Swank.
Ah.
Yes. Okay, so we have a couple people in the chat that got it right. All of them were homeless at one time.
Oh,
All of them. Yeah. So it'd be interesting for you all now to go and like look up Hillary Swank. Well, when was that? Halle Berry, when was that? Right? Because sometimes we can look at people at where they are now in their lives, and we have nothing, we don't have any knowledge about their backstory, right? We don't know anything about their history, right? And again, that goes back to society says, I mean, look at Halle Berry. Did she look like she was ever homeless? Absolutely not. Not right now. Right? So those are the kinds of things that I want you all to be mindful of as you're in the farmer's market, as people are approaching, you know, your stand, as you're having conversation with them, right? As you are inviting people to come to the farmer's market, those kinds of things. So Dr. Bonaji, who was one of the original researchers and founders of the term implicit bias, she wrote this book that I really like. It's called Blind Spot: Hidden Biases of Good People. And in the book, she talks about how she really does believe that the implicit bias comes from culture. And she feels like it's kind of like a thumbprint on culture that the culture puts on our minds, essentially. But what she does say that I really love is none of that really matters, because what we teach ourselves and what we choose to associate is up to us. See, once you start to understand how this works, you start to understand that, yes, those associations started when I was just a baby. I was a toddler in all of these different sort of spaces, whether that was at school or with my family or watching TV or, you know, watching MSNBC or seeing the Fox News or whatever. If you believe in strengths-based as a mindset, then you're always continuing to learn as human beings. And what we choose to do and to associate really is up to us. So that's a really good book. Not sure if you're going to go out and get it, but I think it's a really good one to have in your arsenal. So how do we create a welcoming, relevant, and accessible experience for all? How is that done? Or how should that be done? Well, this is a picture from your website. And, you know, one of the goals is to create that kind of experience for folks at the farmer's market. When you all look at this picture, what do you see? Does it look welcoming?
Yeah.
It-
Yeah.
What makes it look welcoming?
Seems like everybody has a comfortable place to sit and talk or relax and interact with the people that they can with, and also they're closely connected to the people that they didn't come with that are in other tables that are sitting down.
People look
Excellent.
comfortable. People look comfortable.
And how do you know they're
I
comfortable?
don't think it's welcoming.
Body language.
Body language.
And they're looking
Yeah.
at each other.
Yes,
They see each other.
yes, they see each other. Hold on to that one. That's really good. They're looking at each other. They see each other. Okay. Is the space accessible? Oh, somebody had something to say? Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, it looks like a space where people are just welcome, you know, some people have kids, the fact that kids are there, you got older people, you got different races, up in there. So to me, it says welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Is it accessible? Are people
Yeah.
able to access what they need in this picture?
And
It may look kind of tight logistically, but it depends on what's going on. You know, this may be a specific rest spot for people to rest while they're interacting with other aspects or component of a market or an event.
Okay, that's
I mean,
a
I
good
know-
perspective. Yes.
Yeah. I know where this market is. This is the old Saturday market that we used to have. And it was, in my eyes, a very welcoming place, a very open place, accessible. It depends on, I mean, how you define accessibility in this picture.
I want you all to define it in all the ways that you think about. So what is one way?
It
that you're
appears
thinking
to
of
be, it appears to be something public. I wasn't aware of, you know, where this photo was taken, but it's kind of outdoors, so I would think it would be accessible.
In what way, Jeremy?
I mean, I'm thinking more so like for the community. Just for,
Oh, I see. Just
Yeah.
open for the community to come to and to attend. Even
Yeah.
if you just didn't even know if it was happening. You saw it, you know, you're walking down the street. Oh, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go on over there, see what's
Yeah.
happening.
just jump
Okay.
in. The New Orleans thing to do.
Got it.
Just walk in.
Exactly.
That's exactly, yeah, that's exactly what that market was. Accessibility was there to all, whether, you know, if you saw where parking was located in a garage, giving accessibility for parking. People didn't have to side street park.
Okay.
Space within the market, it looks crowded, but if you were
Yeah.
there, you would know that there were multiple rows and people passing within each. Comfort to those people that didn't want to stand, giving tables to sit.
Yeah.
Then there's
Yeah.
shade under the table shade you from the sun.
Yep.
So it's comfortable, welcoming.
What about someone who was in a wheelchair? Would it be accessible for them?
Yes. I'm going to tell you, doing that market was. We had many people come in different types of handicap accessibility and easily access the market from my eyes. You saw everyone there.
I don't
Got
see
it.
I don't see a stroller, but I would think, you know, some of those kids look pretty young. So,
Yep.
you know, I would think.
It looks like a wheelchair can maneuver between the rows.
Yeah.
I think that's the key word. We assume it can, but do we visually see?
Looks like it can. So we have to measure it up to make sure.
Exactly. Then what about relevance? Is this relevant for the people that are actually there?
Yeah, especially the folk with young kids, because they can get a little bit more control. This is like a controlled area where you can bring your kids and sit down and get you a break. You know, you've been running behind the kids all day now. You got them collectively in one spot. They can sit down and you can talk about what they're doing and get a breather and then go back to it. You know, so it's if it's no more than an oasis for the parents.
An oasis for the parents. I love that. Yes.
Uh-huh.
In what other
I'm
way
not-
or ways is it relevant?
It's a part of the market. It's a part of the experience that's being presented.
And what experience is that?
Family.
Multi-generational.
There you go.
Multicultural for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
This picture, I'm joking. This picture is old enough. I see a lot of these babies that are now well past their into their I see people here that's actually making me smile. I haven't seen them in so long.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
fabulous. Yeah. So it's multicultural, it's multi-generational, it's a
Mhm.
controlled area, so parents can bring their children, you all said. So it's kind of an
Everybody needs
oasis
to
for
buy food.
parents. And everybody what?
Everybody needs to buy food.
Everybody needs to buy
We've got a
food.
common interest for everybody.
Common interests, yes. Is there anything that would make this more relevant? What might make it more relevant for people?
Specific signage. You have more signage for directions and make it more relevant. And
Okay.
Mm.
Be easier to navigate if you had more specific signs, right?
yeah.
Okay, what else?
What would make
It's okay if you don't come up with something else. It's fine. You all you've given a lot of really great responses. Awesome. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. Thank you for that. So what you see on this slide is a graphic that I created that I show all the time.
right
The
now?
bottom left is what I consider to be segregation. The yellow dots represents a majority group. The bottom right is a representation of integration. The top right is a representation of exclusion. And the top left is a representation of belonging.
Mm.
And when you have belonging, then I'll talk more about this on the next slide, but you can pictorially see belonging here.
Yeah.
My question, as a two-part question for all of you all. First, there is where are you right now as a vendor for the farmer's market? Do you personally, as a vendor, do you feel and experience segregation, integration, exclusion, or belonging? If you're brave enough, you can answer that question, but it's
Belonging.
it's on a voluntary basis. Yeah.
I feel belonging, but I think there's always a little imbalance, leaning that you don't want to be into the integration, or you don't want to be exclusion, you don't want to be segregation, and you fully want to be belonging. And I think that's my target in life, is to fit within that whole circle.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I can say where I want to be. I hope I don't fall within things that I don't think is right for me, but I hope belonging is where I am.
Who else would like to respond to that question?
Well, technically, when you have a for-profit operation that deals with the general public, You know, the old saying, the customer is always right, is the basic rule. And if you're lucky enough to have a product that it's inclusive to everyone, and I would say in a farmer's market, we all fit into that context because we have something, all people need nutrition. All human beings need, you can draw everyone together around the dinner table. We have discussions of new foods, a way to cook them. I mean, a plethora of things that can happen when discussing food. So basically, everyone at a farmer's market has something that everyone wants, food. You have food. Now, products are not bought, they are sold. You have to sell your product, be confident in it, and technically, personally, I can say with my product, I project it as something that's benefit, that like I even have longevity in every bite. That's what I say about my microgreens. It's going to extend your life. I don't care if you a pygmy Eskimo, it's going to extend your life. If you live in, if you're from the Ninth Ward, or you're out front of town, out back of town, out in the country, you eat Mike's microgreens, and you're going to enhance your life. It's going to, you know, that's a way you're already ahead of the game because you got what everybody wants. It's just you have to find a way to sell it.
Okay, thank you for that. So where are you right now in terms of you as a vendor creating this welcoming, relevant, and accessible experience for the shoppers? Are you creating an environment of belonging, exclusion, integration, or segregation?
I believe we have to learn how to look at the people as people and not as color, nationality, or anything else. We've been doing this since the market opened for 20-something years, and we have learned that people are people. You can have every color treat you bad, but you got to keep on treating them good. And believe it or not, they'll turn around in a few weeks and they're your friend. And it's like, you're here to sell something, but you're also here to meet these people's need.
That's right.
And they also meet our need as becoming friends. We have so many friends between the vendors and the customers, and it's because we look at them as people, and we have to throw out the thought of all the colors and the dispositions and everything else. And I'll trust you. Ask Angelina. I had a disposition. I have a disposition. You push me the wrong way, but we have to stop and say, people are people. We're all humans, and we have to treat each other as humans. Doesn't matter where you come from.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you look like. We're here to help you buy our products.
Yes.
Okay, one last response, and I'm going to go on to the next slide.
Well, I feel like it's belonging. I feel like I belong there. And as far as people feeling included, yeah, I think so. We've got every background, and we do tend to see the people. Me personally, I've got a rainbow family, ethnically and orientation wise. We look like the United Nations, and they'd all be welcome there. And our shoppers do too. Gay and straight of every possible description.
Yeah.
Black and white and yellow and brown and anything else there is. They're there, and we're all talking to each other. It's a really nice community, different political backgrounds, but we got something to talk about that we all share in a non-threatening environment that's pretty open. I can sell all my honey at grocery stores, a lot easier than coming to the market. But I like coming to the market. It's a nice place.
Awesome.
And part
Thank
of it
you
is
for
so
that.
many people belong there.
So belonging is a basic human need. It's that feeling of security and that feeling of support, right? It's that sense that you are accepted, that you are included, that you can stand on your own 2 feet and show up in the full representation of who you are, right? As an individual and as a part of a certain group. And I always talk about belonging in terms of the 3 C's. That first one is comfort, right? Is the environment at the farmer's market such that you as a vendor or your customers can just show up as who they are, the full representation. Also, when there's belonging, there's a connection. So you all talked about in the photo, right, that people were looking at each other, that they were in close proximity, right? You could tell that there was connections happening there, right? So there was a sense of belonging through connection. And then the last for belonging is a contribution. You know, maybe just like this gentleman talked about, you all have so much to talk about. There's contributions through the conversations that you're having. There's contributions through talking to somebody that you don't even know about a recipe, right? There's contribution, right? And so those 3 C's are what need to be present if a person is going to have a sense of belonging. So this is a short video. I think it's like 2 minutes that I want you all to listen to. And then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Usually I'll just start with, well, I'm Canadian, but depending on who's asking it, I know what they're actually asking me. So if it's a white person, I know they're actually asking like, you know, tell me about your brown skin.
I get asked that question all the time. Where are you from? It's about how do I place you? How do you come to belong here? Do you belong here? So all those things are sort of at the back of this question.
Hey everybody, my name is Christy Charles. I'm from Musqueam and I live in this place called Vancouver. In our Indigenous communities, it's kind of like a fun thing we say to like, oh, hey, where you from? Who's your mom? But then when I'm talking to people in the city, they don't know that I come from here, right? And this is our home for thousands of years. So when someone says to me, oh, I'm from Vancouver, I'm like, well, where are you really from? Because I'm really from Vancouver, yeah.
The question speaks to the limits of Canadian multiculturalism. There's the rhetoric of it, a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. There's a Canadian mosaic of cultures and races that make up Canada. And then there's the reality. The expectation is that real Canadians are white Canadians.
Where's your ethnic background? Actually, I go out of my way to ask that question to white people to kind of reaffirm that we're actually not really from here.
There's a kind of tokenization to the idea of indigeneity being one of the founding peoples of Canada. Because I think it's really ironic for Canada to be so very open about bringing other people into land that is in fact other people's land.
I could take it in a negative way because it does frustrate me sometimes, always having to repeat myself.
It's a heavy thing to ask depending on how far the other person is pushing you to answer it and how deep they want you to answer it. It can take a toll on you, for sure.
I think people can ask it as a benign question, as just, I'm curious. They literally mean, where are you from? Because you don't sound like you're from here. Or you don't look like you're from here. So you don't mean it in a bad way, but its effect is to tell that person, you don't belong here, or you might not belong here. We have to get to a point where that question becomes unnecessary.
So what were your thoughts about that video as it relates to when you think about the farmer's market, your job as a vendor, the customers?
Well, being from New Orleans, we got kind of a unique situation. Because culturally, you know, everything is about the food. People come from all over the world to experience our food, how we cook it, how we grow it, how we do everything with our food. Then the music and everything is just a web, a sculpted, hand-woven sculpted web of something that most people in the United States don't experience, you know. I mean, a plethora of people come from all over the world to experience what we take for granted a lot of times. So that's an advantage that we have at our markets, because We have unique things that are indigenous to us that people love. So again, we have an advantage. It's not like I'm trying to sell fracked oil. I'm selling food, nutritious, sustainable vegetables and food products that everyone enjoys and loves. And it's almost an easy task, because the things that we provide are things that are beneficial to the public. We just have to keep hovering on that. I mean, I may not know the key to success, but I do know the key to failure. You cannot please everyone, but the majority of the people that I confront, I leave whether they buy from me or not, if they're interested or not, they're going to be treated with dignity. Hello, how are you? Good morning. The basic cordial greetings and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And if that customer is dissatisfied, then I'm gonna try to rectify it as quickly as I can without any, and then again, in New Orleans, we had advantage. We got lanyard to do. We got lanyard we can give people. People come to my counter and I may have some product that I know I can't sell, ugly vegetables or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I give it to customers and they appreciate it. Oh, thank you. You're a regular customer. Here's your lanyard for today.
I'm going to need you to wrap it up, sir, so we can give someone else an opportunity to speak.
That's it.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree with most of what Mike said, and I think it is kind of unique in New Orleans. But the people in the videos, what they were talking about, I think they felt like they didn't belong, or someone was trying to make them feel like they didn't belong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I'd feel. I've occasionally been in situations where I was the oddball, well, more than occasionally. And, yeah, that's how you feel when somebody asks you that.
Yeah.
Like you're being put off, or pushed away. That's how
If I might,
Okay.
if I may say something?
Yes, one more person. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, I just felt this probably is appropriate for me to kind of stay in, because I usually get that question asked of me and my husband rather than us asking. My accent is nothing compared to my husband's. He's from Ukraine. I'm from Belarus. So we both grew up here. We both
Hello?
Where'd you go, Irina?
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Yeah, I think we lost her.
Can I add something, Will?
Sure. Uh-huh.
I don't know. I looked at the people that were speaking and I tried to put myself in their place. And I just realized that I shouldn't be looking at people with a mirror in my hand and wanting to see my reflection.
Bingo.
I think I should be looking at people as individual and not be me. And that's what I saw with this.
That's outstanding. Thank you. In the interest of time, thank you all so much for your participation. I'm going to move on. So one of the things that you can do as when you want to start thinking about creating a more welcoming, relevant, and accessible environment for your other colleagues that are vendors and also for the customers is you can sort of play this game and figure out how diverse is my universe. So I didn't send out the Zoom, so typically there will be polls, but I just want you to listen to each one of these statements. And as you're answering each statement, I want you to think about it in terms of whether or not you're going to put a purple marble into the cup, which represents Latino, yellow for Black or African American into the cup, blue for Asian, gray for white, fuchsia for bi or multiracial, green for American Indian or Alaska Native, and pink for Native Hawaiian. So for example, if I say, select a bead that most closely represents your ethnicity. So you just want to hold in your mind which color bead you selected. And as I go through each one of these statements, I want you to, in your mind, or you can write it down if you want, select a bead color. And then when we're done, I have a series of questions for you. Select the bead that most closely represents your ethnicity. Got it?
Yes.
Select the bead that most closely represents the ethnicity of your significant other or your partner. My doctor is. My dentist is. Select a bead that represents the ethnicity of your closest friend. The people in my social circle are predominantly. In the last good movie I saw, the people were predominantly. The people in my favorite TV show are predominantly. The people in my favorite music group or band are predominantly. So those are all of the statements, and these are some questions to consider. Do you ever stop to think of how often you communicate with people outside of your group? Do you consider yourself to be someone who often interacts with others? And after this exercise, do you still?
Mm-hmm.
What did your visual representation show you? If you have little to no interaction with people outside of your group, how does that affect your ability to interact with someone different from you? If you have little to no exposure to others, do you think you should make an effort to be more engaged with people different from you? And if so, how? Remember earlier we talked about how as human beings, we all have these unconscious biases, assumptions, associations, stereotypes. We all have them. We carry them with us. One of the ways to break outside of that and sort of kind of constricted ways of thinking about people, because even when you think you don't have unconscious bias, you have it. One of the ways is to really consider how diverse your universe is. And then take some steps to be more engaged with people that are different from you. Different religion, different political beliefs, different neighborhood. And you could go on and on and on. Because stereotypes really do produce language use and they produce behavior. So I'm just putting a couple of examples up here. We won't spend a lot of time because we don't have a lot of time left, but vegetarians on the left. You might hear some of these words. Oh, they think everybody should adjust to them. They're such hippies. Or maybe extremely thin people. Oh, she's an exercise freak. Or you might think that they're really sick or they don't take care of themselves. Oh, or he's so lucky. Wealthy people or people from the country. You might have thoughts and assumptions and stereotypes about wealthy people that they're lazy and have no work ethic. Or they treat everybody like they work for them. Or they're spoiled. Or people from the country. They're uneducated. They got huge families. Only thing you're gonna find over there is a bunch of gun racks in their trucks. These are the kinds of things, right, that you can hold these associations and these stereotypes. If you don't move out of sort of your comfort zone, right, and interact with lots of different people, to learn different people, to learn their stories, to learn their cultures, to learn their backgrounds, to learn their abilities, to learn their interests. That's the way we start to learn more, be more open, and actually build what I call the empathy muscle. So the second way to start to create a more welcoming, relevant, and accessible environment is to keep an open mind. And that's just this idea of just being open to change, right? Being open to the growth mindset. It's a really good book called Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck, if you're into reading books. Be open to learning and understanding, right? Try to stand in someone else's shoes. I think someone mentioned that earlier. And the good thing with having an open mind is you don't have to have all the answers or be perfect. You just have to be open to change and willing to continue learning. Part of that willing to continue learning, as you think about the farmers market, right? And you think about, the fact that, New Orleans is a majority African-American city, but you don't have a majority African-Americans at the farmers market, is to think a little bit about the history of this city. And this obviously wasn't something that just happened in New Orleans, but it happened all over the United States. And we're still feeling the effects of redlining, right? The impact of racist housing policies. It still does resonate today, right? And you can see on the right, this is the grading system that they used for redlining. Red was hazardous, right? Yellow was in decline, still desirable was blue, and green was best. Interestingly enough to me, green sort of is the color we associate with money. So when you think about who's coming and who's not coming to the farmers market, who's a vendor, who's not a vendor, we have to actually be open-minded, right? And think about, even historically, institutionally, what has happened, right, to create the fissure. There's a huge wealth gap in New Orleans. And there's already this sense or this feeling that farmers markets, for some reason, that they're too expensive. I don't personally believe that because I like farmers markets. I go to farmers markets. But there are a lot of people who have that sentiment. The other thing to think about and be open about is, and I love this report that the United Way puts out, because what they look at is who has enough money to actually meet their basic living costs. And this is from New Orleans for 2016. This is looking at households by race. Not that people may not want to come to a farmer's market, but if you couple the fact that they think that farmers markets are too expensive with the fact that they don't have a lot of what they're in their mind is disposable money, right? Then that may be the reason why they're not coming. So maybe there's something that you all can do collectively as vendors. I know you have a board of some sort, right? To help a market umbrella come up with ideas, right? You are creative, you all are innovative. Many of you have been in business for a very long time. You have thoughts and ideas about what can be done about this. The third is about language. Language is really powerful. The words that we use are very powerful. And whether we realize it or not, the words we use really do impact the way people around us feel in terms of whether or not they feel like they belong or they're experiencing belonging. So that was a beautiful picture I showed of the farmers market, but it didn't show the people who didn't feel comfortable, who didn't feel a sense of belonging, who actually came and then probably left, or, came for a period of time and decided they weren't going to come back. So we have to think about inclusive language, right? What are the words that we're speaking, right? Inclusive language has these three characteristics: respectful, it's accurate, and it's relevant. So if somebody talked about showing people dignity and being cordial, that's absolutely a part of demonstrating inclusive language. And inclusive language gives a more accurate view of the real world because it reflects the actual social diversity rather than making false assumptions about people, which is what we've been talking about this entire time. And then it's relevant. It's meaningful to a wide audience, and it enables everyone to feel that they are being reflected in what is being said. So just to give you an example, right in the middle of the pandemic, the United Nations put out a tweet, and it was a list of gender inclusive terms that would promote greater awareness around gendered language. So instead of saying mankind, say humankind. Instead of saying, oh, that's the policeman, say police officer. Instead of saying, that's the salesman that comes to my house, because we had a lot of salesmen after the hurricane. Say salesperson. Oh yeah, we had a lot of people come to my house, sir. We were overwhelmed by the number of people. Instead of saying fireman, firefighter. And saying, when someone comes up to you and they're together and you're just in conversation with them and you say, oh, is that your partner? Instead of saying, is that your girlfriend, your wife? There's a social diversity, there's a change that's happening in society. Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go that fast. So number 4 is this idea of observing and reflecting and considering how others are experiencing the surroundings. Yeah. How are things physically set up? I know you're there to sell product, but this will help you sell more product if you're really paying attention to how people are moving through the space, what's happening in their experience. So I want to show you this graphic, and then I want you to think about it in terms of in terms of welcoming, relevant, and accessible. And then we'll talk about it in about a minute. Okay, I'll open up the floor, or if you want to put something in the chat. What are you thinking about? What comes to mind when you look at this? Is it welcoming? Is it accessible? Is it relevant? Does anybody have any thoughts? Yes, I see what you just put in there, Marguerite. Thank you for that. No one has anything to say about this graphic?
Okay, I'll say something.
This is typically the most talked about one.
I'll say something.
Yes.
The pink circle is doing what Ann talked about, trying not to do. Seeing him or herself.
Right.
Not seeing the other people.
Yeah.
You don't have any problem. I can do it. You can do it. You got the same chance to do what I do. That's probably not true. But they're not seeing the other person as an individual, as being what they are. They're seeing their, as she said, seeing their reflection, her own reflection, not seeing the other person.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Which necessarily means it's the white person, probably, because it's the group with the power that doesn't recognize the other people's differences. The people who have to deal with people with power tend to see the differences more clearly because they have to.
Yes. All of what you said, true and true.
What comes to my mind is just thinking about, how do we tear down those barriers, right? The one circle get through, looks back and say, look, just do what I did. When, it's not always that easy. But, something that could happen is how about we remove that barrier, get rid of that wall itself. And I know there's things that we can't change. There's certain things that it just won't change. That's the way it is. But we got to look at, okay, what can we do to make things a little bit more accessible for other people. So
we can leave the wall. We just need to make an opening that everybody can fit through.
There you go. There you go. See,
I always have someone ask, well, what's the purpose of the wall? Why is there a wall there in the first place?
Yes, indeed.
It's an obstacle. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, or maybe it's a barrier you got to get through with education or experience or things that you got to acquire to be able to do something. It's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily appear to be something to exclude people, but that's the effect it has. Because they can't get what they need to get through that barrier to the next phase of their business or their life.
Yeah. Are there any walls for you as vendors?
Well, yes, because in certain instances, people may not understand what you're trying to sell. So then it's your responsibility to inform them. But again, sometimes round pegs can't fit through square holes. There's a reality to certain things.
So let me say this.
Then I think empathy then becomes a major tool that the person can use. I can't fit you through that round hole, but I can empathize where you are. I can feel where you're coming from. And I hope my product makes it better for you.
So one more comment that is here actually in the chat that I want us to talk about before we move on. It says, we assume people come to the market with the same baseline knowledge, but they know different things about food. Would you all agree with that?
Yes. Because we have people from regular first-time newbies coming to a farmer's market to a seasoned chef coming out looking for the best thing for his menu that day.
Yeah, and maybe the pink circle in this graphic is kind of like, the person who comes to the farmer's market all the time and they know everything and they have a high level of knowledge. And all these other people are like, well, this is like my second time coming here. I don't know too much about and how do we make that more welcoming and relevant and accessible for them?
put a couple of slot machines in there.
Any other ideas?
I think sometimes it's just taking a moment to say, we're glad that you're here, like
Yeah.
to acknowledge,
Yes.
you know, that people are making a choice to be here.
Yeah.
You know, personally, I tell everyone, even whether they buy from me, sometimes I wave at people or they pass like, thanks for coming out. Thank you for coming out. I make sure I tell thank you. They say, oh, no, thank you for being here. But I'm going to tell you, thank you for coming out. Thank you.
It looks like we have, thank you for that. It looks like, is it Irina has her hand raised?
Irina, yeah.
Irina, okay.
The one that got lost.
You're back. Thank you so much for
sorry,
coming
my
back.
image. Oh, no, of course. The reception here is not great. So my image is not, it's like distorted. But I just wanted to say a quick thing. I find that there's a lot of, especially first timers, and not a lot, but I mean, there's quite a bit of customers that come with this preconceived sort of idea of comparing farmers market products to supermarket products. And I think that one of those things of breaking down the barriers and making people, you know, sometimes the barrier is there to maybe protect the vendor, not to keep anybody out, but to sort of, you know, very carefully educate people about the difference. And I mean, obviously with certain things like produce and, you know, other things, the difference is very clear. You get local, you get fresh, you know, sometimes organic, but even if it's not certified organic, you can talk to the person that grew it in, you know, what matter it's grown in, whether they use pesticide, what do they use? But then when it comes to added value vendors such as myself, the bakeries or jams, whatever it is, the prepared foods, there's that extra sort of, I don't know if you call it barrier or whatever you want to call it, where you really have to kind of educate and make people sort of, without making any kind of medical or nutritional claims, but at the same time making them understand that there is a difference. Well, at least like, I mean, at least in our product, there is definitely a difference, which has been sort of recognized and like reported by the customers. But that's one of the things that's important to put out there, you know, that you can't, and that goes back to the prices. I have a lot of regular customers that have been coming back now for years, and they follow us to whatever market we go to, because we started in the North Shore and they come from North Shore to see us. That when they first started, they couldn't understand such a difference in price. Bread is bread, you know. And now that they've been eating bread for years and seen the difference and felt the difference and tasted the difference, they understand, they educate other people, but it's kind of a delicate thing without being offensive and without being too self-absorbed, I guess. Is that the right way to put it? And still keeping that balance and educating.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing your thoughts. That's absolutely something that you all have to tackle as a vendor, and still maintain your ability to be welcoming. And number 5 is make one commitment and work on that particular commitment until you've mastered it, and then choose another one.
Makes sense.
So what, and I'm not going to play this because we run out of time. So what one commitment can you all make as a vendor in terms of making things more welcoming and relevant and accessible?
Hi, this is Maddie from Veggie.
Yes.
I think folks who are working in agriculture and as farmers, and I can speak for my experience in that I sell products or I sell produce for the laborers, for the farmers, right? And in agriculture, the laborers aren't often represented at market. So, you know, when we think about farming and we think about farm workers and the laborers, you know, data shows us they're historic, you know, they're individuals of color. So I work really hard to let my customers know that my farmers are Vietnamese. Their origins are from Vietnam, and now they're living here and they're farming. And so I think a conversation that we can all have as vendors and as farmers or work in the farming space is how can we more accurately represent the laborers in this industry, because I feel like they're often forgotten and they do a lot of the heavy lifting here. So just wanted to call that to mind.
No, that's an excellent call out. Thank you so much for that. Yes. And then Anthony put a comment in the chat. It's talking about the loss of the ability of people from all cultures nowadays to know how to cook and be raised learning how to cook is the biggest wall stopping things from being accessible to a huge number of people. If people don't know how to cook of various foods, the accessibility is irrelevant. It's a one-time day trip instead of an integration into a community long-term. It's fascinating. I'm sorry, just really quickly, it's really fascinating because I'm actually having the same conversation with a different client in Connecticut about a certain generation just not knowing how to cook and not really even caring to know how to cook. Yeah. Somebody's going to say something before we shut things down.
I was,
yeah.
If we go back to sort of what you were talking about at the beginning of this training.
Yeah.
We all of us who grew up in this country grew up with in a country that was based on, historically, it was racist against indigenous peoples and against African slaves. And that a lot of that culture is carried on into how the unconscious way we think about people. And as a white male or white person, period, if I simply say racism is bad and deny it, and I'm not going to be that way, I'll stay that way because it's built in. If I search myself and find it, look at it in myself, and then try to let it go, I can see other people as people more successfully, and I'll be less racist. I'll never be completely without racism because I grew up in this culture, but I can get rid of a lot, if not most of it, by recognizing it and then letting it go, not by denying it. And by doing that, I can see the people more as people and they'll feel it. And so will I. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you for that, Terry. Anybody else? I know we're 6 minutes over. I thank you all so much. You've been so gracious to stay this extra time. Any last words before we close out?
I just like to re-emphasize the place where we are. We're in New Orleans.
Isn't that great?
A place that is culturally significant. We have Master P say, bout it, bout it. I say, bout it, shout it, shout it. You got a good product? Shout it out. Tell people about it. Let them know that your product is good. It's wholesome. It has benefits. It has benefits that people may not recognize, that you're in a special place. You're in a special place. So I think we have an advantage over other areas when it comes to dealing with diversities, because it's all intermixed, and I mean, you know,
yeah.
But we have one particular thing: food. We're in a food industry. We have products that people need to live. All living creatures need good nutrition, and that's what we provide. We provide it in a way that's different from anywhere else in the world. Just ride that horse. I'm gonna ride that stallion all the way down.
Well, thank you for those closing remarks, Michael. Cordelia?
I was just gonna say, based on what Tony said, I think to me it's, can we, as vendors or as market staff share, like, when someone's talking, food is the common thing we have to talk about at the market, or at least one of the really common things. So saying like, this is what I like to make with this, or what do you like to make with that? I think that's a common exchange that shares a little bit oftentimes about your background, or your eating habits or philosophy or religion or whatever. But I think it's it's one of the things I like the best about being a market shopper and being a part of the market, is I learn so much from other people about food. And so you may not buy it the first time, but you'll keep coming back and maybe try it another time.
Well, I just want to thank you all so much for being here today. I heard so many incredible things from all of you, and thank you for participating. Hopefully you got something useful out of this training. Again, I will be doing these trainings with the board of directors for Market Umbrella as well as the staff. And I hope to see you all at one of the Crescent City Farmers Markets soon, because I've been telling Cordelia I'm coming, but I haven't made it yet. Even though I go to other farmers markets. Ooh, I shouldn't say that. Awesome. But no, I really do love eating fresh food. I actually, my husband and I actually eat plant-based whole food 24/7. So I am going to make it out there, and thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you.
All right. Enjoy the